So by now you probably heard the big news of Tesla stock price getting risen up to $400 by an analyst from Morgan Stanley. In fact, ever since this news came out, we saw Tesla stock rise up aggressively in the pre-markets and continue rising up for the entirety of the day. Now, I've shared a few words on this last night in my community post for this YouTube channel, saying that this positive analysis on Tesla is starting to show that Wall Street is beginning to appreciate Tesla's potential beyond automotive. This means that eventually more Wall Street capital will eventually flow into Tesla. And remember, according to FINRA, institutions account for over 70% of the activity in the markets. This means that retail investors of Tesla will soon reap benefits of Wall Street finally showing up. Although I often talk about Tesla in the short term as a trader, I am also a long-term bull for Tesla since 2017. In due time, patience will be rewarded. Now in this video, I want to go ahead and talk about what we're seeing with Tesla stock and a couple of things that we have to consider going forward. However, I want to briefly just touch on what I shared in my community post on why this is such exciting news. For example, if we take a look at the institutional holdings for Tesla, we see that it only has 42% of institutional ownership in comparison to some of the other large mega cap stocks that have a huge amount of institutional ownership. For example, when we take a look at Microsoft, we see that the institutional ownership is above 70%. And so again, like I said, we're starting to see Wall Street finally get Tesla right. Now, if we take a look what the analyst said, he said investors have long debated whether Tesla is an auto company or a tech company. He went on to say, we believe it's both, but the biggest value driver from here being software and service revenue. The same forces that have driven Amazon Web Services to reach 70% of Amazon's earnings can work at Tesla. Now, for a while on this channel, I've stated that we wanted to pay attention to this range for Tesla, as this is a range where we see that there's a lot of volume relative to price, and once Tesla either breaks above it or breaks below it, we see these volume pockets where we see little volume relative to price. And so if there's a lot of buying pressure and Tesla's either in either of these areas, there's going to be a huge movement in Tesla, and that's exactly what we got today. Now, one thing I want to highlight is that this analysis that was done by this analyst wasn't a discounted cash flow analysis where you really dive deep into the fundamentals of Tesla and look into its intrinsic value. This was more of a comparative analysis, but nonetheless, what we're starting to see is Wall Street finally understanding Tesla a bit. Now, this morning in the Push and Profit private group, I highlighted how at 9:40 Apple was selling off and dragging the S&P 500 downwards, and then at 9:54 I said the 3 stages of reversal on Apple are taking place, highlighting a video that I've done previously on this channel breaking down the 3 stages of a reversal, meaning that this was an area where we were seeing Apple reverse upwards. Now, if you guys want to be a part of the Push and Profit private group, make sure to check out the links in the description below, because the first link is going to be a link to join the Push and Profit private group, but there is also another link in the description, and I'm also going to pin it in the comment section below as well, where you get access to my free weekly market post insights, where every single Sunday I send out an email talking about what are some things that we should absolutely pay attention to going into the overall markets. And once again, it's completely free to sign up. So I'm going to have that pinned in the comment section below. But with that said, let's go ahead and hop into Tesla, or hop into my laptop and talk a little bit more about Tesla. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop taking a look at Tesla. Now again, I want to provide that friendly reminder that fundamentally there have been no updates on Tesla, right? Nothing changed in regards to the number. The only thing that has changed is now we had one of the analysts from Morgan Stanley kind of open his eyes and really show the world that, hey, look, Tesla going forward actually looks very promising. Again, nothing changed. It's just Wall Street is kind of being a little bit more open towards Tesla. And this is good because, as I've shared earlier, Tesla has a low institutional holding, meaning if you're invested in Tesla right now, well, you're most likely going to benefit if institutional holdings, right, start pouring a ton of capital into Tesla. And so that's pretty much what I've said so far in this video, but I want to talk about a couple of things right now. Since this news came out, let's go ahead and look at the close of yesterday and look at the close of today. Tesla went up above 9.82%, so definitely a huge move for Tesla. And if we take a look at, let's say, Apple, I mean, the close of Apple yesterday in comparison to Apple today was pretty much a small, minuscule move of 0.39%. In fact, Apple actually sold off aggressively, and you guys saw earlier in the video, I called out how this was a good area to buy, as this was a perfect example of the 3 stages of a reversal. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that tomorrow Apple has their event where they have their iPhone 15 launch. And this is something that we want to pay attention to. Why do you want to talk about Apple when we should be talking about Tesla, right? That's one of the questions I often get. But one of the things you have to understand is that Apple has a huge weighting in a lot of the indices, right? So if we take a look at the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ, Apple has a huge weighting. And so when Apple doesn't do well, that could pull the overall market downward. And that's why if we take a look at the SPY, the S&P 500 Index ETF, we saw that it was selling aggressively downwards alongside with Apple, right? Not saying that whatever Apple does always is going to be congruent with the overall market, but it has a huge influence is what I'm trying to say. And so that's something we want to be mindful of if we're looking at things in the short term, right? So we want to pay attention to how Apple's event is perceived, because one of the things we've seen in Apple's recent earnings, in fact, let's go ahead and zoom out a bit, right? Let's look at a daily time frame. Apple sold off aggressively in their last earnings, and they beat their earning estimates, but there's a difference between beating earning estimates that were already revised down by analysts and actually having their earnings grow. And so one of the issues with Apple was their iPhone sales are not doing that great, right? And then also we also had, if you're wondering about what happened over here with the recent selling in Apple, we had officials in China basically ban iPhones, right? Now, this isn't the overall population in China. This is just, government officials banning iPhones. And that's a little bit of a concern. And so, we want to really see what ends up happening with Apple tomorrow. But one of the main catalyst events that we want to pay attention to that is also going to have a huge influence on Tesla going into the end of this week is going to be what happens on September 13th, which is going to be the consumer price index as well as the core consumer price index, the CPI and core CPI. What is that? Well, that is an inflationary gauge that we get to see how inflation is doing. And this is the last inflationary gauge that we get before September 20th when we have the Federal Reserve make their decision on monetary policy. And look, monetary policy has a huge influence on the overall markets, right? Because that's one of the reasons why it's been very challenging for Tesla, right? Let's go ahead and talk about this, right? When interest rates are high, well, that ends up bleeding into everything being high as far as interest goes, right? When we look at these auto loans, even with stellar credit, you're looking at 7%. And so that's what's really kind of bringing down the incentive to buy a new vehicle. And so what has Tesla been doing to really tackle and stir up demand for Tesla? Well, they've been doing the price cuts. Well, the price cuts are what pretty much made Tesla fall down in its last earnings, as profit margins was a big concern. But now we're starting to see, okay, well, Tesla could still, they're still profitable even though they're cutting their prices down. And now analysts are saying, hey, let's not only look at Tesla based on their vehicle sales. Let's start looking at Tesla based on what they could do with further services and revenues, talking about, Dojo, their supercomputer, and also their advancements in AI and also robotics. Now, right now, we still can't put like a good evaluation on robotics just yet. But what the idea is that Tesla, if they're able to successfully manufacture a bunch of these Optimus, I believe they're called Optimus humanoid robots, right? The Tesla bots, and still use the same data that they're using for their cars in a way for their robots. Well, that could be huge, because what did we see in the last time we got an update with FSD? We saw Elon Musk do a live on X.com showing that there's a huge improvement with autonomy in the vehicles, and it's simply by using AI and combining that with the lenses of the cameras to have the vehicles study patterns in driving. And so imagine these robots being able to watch someone wash dishes and then using AI to repeat that. And so that's one of the big drivers for why there's optimism for Tesla. It's nothing new. I mean, this is something that we've been saying on the channel that, hey, long term, we're bullish on Tesla based on that. But in the short term, things were getting rough. But now we finally passed this area that I've been talking about. If you're a subscriber to the channel, by the way, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. But if you're a subscriber to the channel, you know that I've been talking about this area for about a couple of weeks now, about how we've had major swings up, major swings down, up, down, up, down. And I said we want to wait to see what happens when Tesla breaks out, because that's going to be a huge move. Why? Again, these little volume pockets, right, where there's little volume relative to price. If there's buying pressure in either of these areas, that's going to be a huge move. And that's what we saw from a technical perspective. Now, I don't think Tesla's going to just yet go into all-time highs. And I know I'm a Tesla, like, I have to clarify this because I know individuals get this confused all the time. I'm a Tesla bull in the long-term portfolio, but I don't necessarily believe that Tesla's going to do a straight line to 400, right? I don't believe that's going to happen. And one of the things we have to see is, yeah, things are looking great for Tesla in the momentum upwards. If we continue to have some buying pressure, which is going to be a good thing. We want to pay attention to what happens around this area right around over here at around 285, because we see that this has presented itself as a technical resistance level where we see this descending trend line where a multitude of different times we see Tesla getting rejected around this area, right? And so that's really the next area that we want to pay attention to. Now, if Tesla does happen to break above this, now that's going to be really great, regardless if you're a trader or an investor, right? So I trade Tesla on my short-term trading account and I invested it in my long-term account. And if Tesla does manage to break this descending trend line, well, I am going to be adding more into my long-term portfolio. Why? Well, that just shows that we just broke a downward trend and now we are into a new trend. And so that's most likely that's what I'm going to be doing if we do see Tesla break above it. Do I think that's going to happen? Well, not necessarily, right? I think that this week is going to not just be an overall straight arrow up, as the CPI report that we're getting is going to have a lot of confusion as to what the Feds are going to do, simply because most likely headline CPI, right, which includes food and energy, which are volatile, are going to rise up, meaning inflation is going to tick up a bit. Why? Well, we see crude oil ticking up a bit. Why are we seeing crude oil go up? Well, we know what the Saudis are doing. We know what's happening in Russia. And so that's the reason why we're seeing, if you look at your local gas stations, I said this in yesterday's video, you're seeing these gas prices go up. I mean, it's insane, right? And so that's why the CPI report, most likely we're going to see headline inflation start showing up for August going upwards, but core inflation may diverge and actually cool off. And so this leaves a big question mark as to what the Feds are going to do. And so that's going to be a question of what they're going to do. However, my stance, and this has been my stance for a while, is that the Feds are most likely going to pause in their September 20th meeting because they still have to evaluate what's currently going on. If they hike, that's too aggressive, right? And if they cut just now, that may also be too aggressive, and so they're most likely going to pause. Now, this pause is going to seem as a bullish catalyst for the overall market. So going into September 20th, that's when I think we're going to start getting close to this resistance area and see if we either reject or break above. I think we're going to have some short-term relief, and that's where we're really going to want to pay attention to Tesla. Now, as far as Tesla going in the long term, I believe that as we go closer to 2024. There's still gonna be some challenges, because even if the Fed starts cutting their the federal funds rate, well, guess what? It doesn't just happen overnight, and so we're still gonna see some stress on the consumers. But halfway into 2024, the second half of the year, I think that's gonna be a great moment. Or for me, I'm gonna be adding more into my long-term portfolio for Tesla, as I think that's gonna be just an area where we're finally seeing relief in the economy. Now, again, you have to do your due diligence and not just copy exactly what I do just simply because I've said it or whatever else someone has said, right? At the end of the day, you can't even copy what the analysts say, right? We have this big move with Tesla, but we have to understand that this same analyst that is saying that Tesla could go up to 400, that he sees that, has been the same analyst for just a couple of years. I think it was just like either September, I don't remember the exact date. But he wasn't very optimistic on Tesla. And so from going from I think it was either 250 all the way to 400, you see how these analysts, even they are all over the place. And so you can't just go based on what Kathy Wood says, or any fund manager, any analyst. You have to do whatever you see value in for your long-term portfolio or either your short-term trading account. Now, for me personally, I am bullish on Tesla in the long term, as we're seeing that trend in EVs continue. We're seeing a lot of governments kind of having this incentive to push EVs, and this is going to benefit, regardless of what your thoughts are on that. The end goal or the end idea is that this is obviously going to benefit companies like Tesla. And so that's why I'm bullish on Tesla in the long term, as well as I'm really excited for the product lines that they're going to have coming out. And we have to be aware that next month is when we actually get fundamental updates for Tesla. Guess what we get next month? We get the delivery numbers. And that's going to be a gauge on how Tesla is doing on the automotive side, right? That's going to be the big question mark. How are they doing? And the idea is that these price cuts are still helping them stir up demand, while you're probably going to see all these legacy automakers that are struggling struggle even further, right? Because they're not even profitable. So for them to cut their prices even more, well, that's not going to look good on their earnings, right? It's not going to be a great fundamental move. And so that's why, I'm bullish on Tesla in the long term. In the short term, we have to watch out. I believe there's going to be some short-term relief with the Fed decision happening on September 20th. But again, we want to watch out for this area because that's going to be another pivotal moment. Just like breaking out of this trend was a pivotal moment, now the next big move is going to be, do we break above this descending trend line? But with that said, I'm going to end this video here, make it just as concise as I can. No need to make it any longer. But make sure to check out this next video right over here where you guys could watch the 3 stages of a reversal so you guys could understand what I meant in today's trade idea with Apple.